Hello and welcome to Amazing Aircraft. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Cessna A-37 Dragonfly. This light attack aircraft was developed from a trainer during the Vietnam War. You might wonder how Cessna, a company known for making small civilian and transport planes, made a fighting machine that could perform well in its intended role. Well, that's what we'll find out in this video. The A-37 Dragonfly was a versatile and effective aircraft that could perform various missions, such as close air support, helicopter escort, and forward air control. It had a twin-engine design, a machine gun in the nose, and 8 hardpoints under the wings for carrying bombs, rockets, napalm, and other weapons. It was also low-cost, accurate, and easy to maintain. It served with distinction in the Vietnam War and several other conflicts and countries. So, are you ready to dive into its story? Then buckle up, and let's go. The story of the A-37 Dragonfly began in the early 1960s when the U.S. military was looking for a new counter-insurgency aircraft to replace the aging Douglas A-1 Skyraider. The Skyraider was a propeller-driven aircraft used extensively in the Korean War and the early stages of the Vietnam War. It could carry a large payload of weapons and fly for long hours. Still, it was also slow, noisy, and vulnerable to enemy fire. The U.S. military wanted a faster, quieter, and more survivable aircraft that could perform the same missions as the Skyraider but with less cost and maintenance. One of the candidates for the counter-insurgency role was the Cessna T-37 Tweet, a small jet trainer widely used by the U.S. Air Force and other countries. The T-37 was a simple and reliable aircraft that could fly up to 660 km per hour and range up to 1,500 kilometers. It had a twin-engine design that gave it good performance and redundancy, and it had dual controls that allowed it to be used as an operational trainer. However, the T-37 was not designed for combat and had several limitations that needed to be overcome. It had a low payload capacity of only 230 kilograms, no armament or hardpoints, and a weak airframe that could only withstand 5 g of force. To transform the T-37 into a counter-insurgency aircraft, Cessna made several modifications and improvements to the airframe and engines, resulting in the prototypes AT-37D and AT-37D. The most noticeable change was the replacement of the original Continental J69 engines with more powerful General Electric J85 engines, which doubled the thrust from 4.6 kN to 11 kN each. These engines were also canted outward and downward to improve single-engine handling and reduce the risk of engine ingestion of debris from unprepared runways. The wings were strengthened and enlarged to accommodate the increased weight and performance, and the landing gear was toughened. The fuel capacity was also increased by adding larger wingtip tanks and a refueling probe to the nose. The AT-37D and AT-37D also received several additions and upgrades to make them more suitable for combat. The most obvious one was the installation of a 7.62 mm minigun on the right side of the nose, which could fire up to 3,000 rounds per minute and had 1,500 rounds of ammunition. The minigun was a Gatling-style machine gun that was developed by General Electric and used by various U.S. aircraft and helicopters in Vietnam. It was a powerful and reliable weapon that could deliver a high rate of fire and accuracy. The prototypes also had 8 hardpoints under the wings, which could carry a variety of weapons, such as bombs, rockets, napalm, and gun pods. The avionics were also updated with new radios, navigation systems, and targeting devices. The prototypes were tested and evaluated by the U.S. Air Force in the mid-1960s, and they showed good results. They demonstrated that they could fly faster, farther, and higher than the Skyraider and carry a comparable payload of weapons. They also proved to be easy to fly and maintain, and they had a low cost of operation. The U.S. Air Force was impressed by the potential of the modified T-37, and they decided to order a small batch of 39 AT-37s, which were later redesignated as A-37As. These were rebuilt from existing T-37Bs, and they had only a few minor changes from the prototypes, such as a redesigned instrument panel and an automatic engine inlet de-icing system. The A-37A was the first production version of the Dragonfly, and it was ready to enter service in 1967. But before it could be fully deployed, it had to face its ultimate test, the Vietnam War. In August 1967, 25 A-37As were sent to Vietnam under the Combat Dragon program. They flew from Bien Hoa Air Base on various missions, such as close air support, helicopter escort, forward air control, and night interdiction. The A-37A was a versatile and effective aircraft that could perform different roles and adapt to different situations. It could fly low and slow, ideal for spotting and attacking enemy targets on the ground. It could also fly fast and high, making it hard to hit by enemy fire. It could carry a wide range of weapons, such as bombs, rockets, napalm, and gun pods, and it could deliver them with high accuracy and precision. It could also escort and protect helicopters, vulnerable to enemy fire and often needed air support. The pilots and ground troops who used or encountered the A-37A were impressed by its performance and capabilities. They praised its reliability, maneuverability, and responsiveness. They also appreciated its simplicity, low cost, and easy maintenance. The A-37A proved a valuable asset for the U.S. military in Vietnam, achieving remarkable results and records in various missions. Some pilots who flew the A-37A had some interesting stories and anecdotes. For example, one pilot recalled how he used his minigun to shoot down a North Vietnamese MiG-17 fighter jet, which was a rare and remarkable feat. Another pilot remembered how he used his napalm tanks to set fire to a large enemy base, which caused a huge explosion and a massive fireball. Another pilot recounted how he used his rockets to destroy a bridge that the enemy used to transport supplies and troops, which disrupted their operations and movements. However, the A-37A had its problems and limitations. One of the main issues was that it needed more range and endurance. The A-37A could only fly for about 2 hours with a full load of weapons and fuel, which limited its operational radius and effectiveness. To extend its endurance, some pilots resorted to flying on one engine, which was a risky and unconventional practice. Another problem was that the A-37A had a heavy control response during attack runs, which made it difficult to aim and fire accurately. The flight controls were not power-boosted, which meant that the pilot had to exert much force and effort to maneuver the aircraft. Another problem was that the A-37A had a vulnerable flight control system, which could be easily damaged by enemy fire or debris. The A-37A had a single and non-redundant elevator control run along the bottom of the fuselage. If this control run were severed or broken, the pilot would lose control of the aircraft and crash. Some pilots also criticized the minigun as ineffective and obstructive. They complained that the minigun had a low muzzle velocity and a high rate of fire, which made it hard to hit moving targets and wasted a lot of ammunition. They also complained that the minigun blocked their view of the target and created a lot of smoke and noise, distracting and annoying them. The feedback and lessons learned from the pilots and ground troops who used the A-37A in Vietnam were valuable and useful for developing and producing the improved A-37B variant, which the U.S. Air Force ordered in early 1967. The A-37B was a new and enhanced version of the Dragonfly, which addressed and solved many of the problems and limitations of the A-37A. The A-37B had several features and improvements, making it superior and more capable than the A-37A. The A-37B had a larger internal fuel tank and 4 external fuel tanks, increasing its fuel capacity from 2,000 to 4,050 liters. This gave the A-37B a longer range and endurance, allowing it to fly for up to 4 hours with a full load of weapons and fuel. The A-37B also had a refueling probe on the nose, which enabled it to receive fuel from a tanker aircraft in midair. This further extended its range and endurance, giving it more flexibility and versatility. The refueling probe was compatible with the probe and drogue system used by the U.S. Navy and other countries, but not with the boom refueling system used by some U.S. Air Force aircraft. The A-37B had a stronger and more durable airframe, which could withstand up to 6 G-force. The airframe was also built to have a longer fatigue life of 4,000 hours, which could be extended to 7,000 hours with proper maintenance. The airframe was also modified to improve the handling and stability of the aircraft, such as by adding a ventral fin and a dorsal strake. The A-37B had several features and systems that increased its survivability and protection in combat. The ejection seats were armored, the cockpit was lined with nylon flak curtains, and the fuel tanks were foam-filled and self-sealing. The A-37B also had redundant elevator control runs placed as far apart as possible to reduce the risk of damage or failure. The A-37B also had more powerful engines, which gave it better performance and redundancy. General Electric J-85 GE-17A's engines provided 12.7 kilonewtons of thrust each. The engines were also canted outward and downward to improve single-engine handling and reduce the risk of engine ingestion of debris. The A-37B was a major improvement over the A-37A, and it was ready to enter service in 1968. The A-37B was mainly intended to be supplied to the Republic of Vietnam Air Force as a replacement for their A-1 Skyraiders, which were becoming obsolete and vulnerable. The A-37B was well suited for the Republic of Vietnam Air Force because it was simple, low cost, and effective for counter-insurgency warfare. The A-37B was also used by the U.S. Air Force in Vietnam, proving to be a formidable and reliable aircraft. However, the A-37B was not a direct replacement for the A-1 Skyraider. as it had a smaller payload and a shorter loiter time. The A-37B could not carry the same amount or variety of weapons as the A-1 Skyraider, and it could not fly for as long or as slow as the A-1 Skyraider. The A-37B had some advantages over the A-1 Skyraider, such as speed, survivability, and accuracy, but it also had some trade-offs and limitations. The A-37B flew over 160,000 combat sorties in Vietnam, achieving remarkable results and records. The A-37B had a low maintenance requirement, which was only 2 hours of maintenance for each hour of flight time. The A-37B also had a high accuracy, an average of 14 meters from the target. The A-37B also had a low combat loss rate, with only 22 aircraft lost out of 577 produced. The A-37B served with distinction and honor in Vietnam, earning the respect and admiration of its allies and enemies. The A-37B was also transferred and captured by the Republic of Vietnam Air Force and the Vietnam People's Air Force, and they used it in the final stages of the war. The Republic of Vietnam Air Force received 254 A-37Bs from the US, and they used them to defend their country from the communist invasion. The Republic of Vietnam Air Force pilots flew the A-37B with courage and skill and inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. However, the Republic of Vietnam Air Force was outnumbered and overwhelmed by the superior forces of the Vietnam People's Air Force, and they lost many of their A-37Bs in combat or on the ground. The Vietnam People's Air Force captured 95 A-37Bs from the Republic of Vietnam Air Force, and they used them to attack their former allies and enemies. The Vietnam People's Air Force pilots flew the A-37B with aggression and audacity, and they surprised and shocked their opponents. The Vietnam People's Air Force used the A-37B to bomb and strafe the South Vietnamese capital of Saigon, and they also used it to shoot down a US C-130 Hercules transport plane, which was the last US aircraft lost in the war. The A-37B played a significant and decisive role in the Vietnam War and was a remarkable and memorable aircraft. After the Vietnam War, the U.S. Air Force transferred their A-37Bs from the Tactical Air Command to the Air National Guard and Air Force Reserve. These aircraft were assigned to the Forward Air Control role and given the designation OA-37B. The OA-37B was a modified version of the A-37B, which had some changes and additions to make it more suitable for the Forward Air Control role. For example, the OA-37B had a smoke generator system that could produce white smoke to mark targets for other aircraft. The OA-37B also had a loudspeaker system, which could broadcast messages to the ground troops or the enemy. The OA-37B also had a new camouflage paint scheme, which was gray and green instead of the original Southeast Asia camouflage of tan, green, and brown. The OA-37B served as a forward air control aircraft for several years and was involved in some operations and missions worldwide. One of the most notable ones was Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama in 1989. The OA-37B was used to provide air support and coordination for the U.S. forces that invaded Panama to overthrow the dictator Manuel Noriega. The OA-37B flew over the Panama Canal and the capital city of Panama, marking targets, directing airstrikes, and communicating with the ground troops. The OA-37B performed well in this operation, and it helped the U.S. achieve its objectives and secure Panama. However, the OA-37B could have been a better aircraft for the forward air control role and faced some challenges and difficulties. One of the main issues was that the OA-37B needed to be more stealthy and agile and could be easily detected and tracked by the enemy radar and air defenses. The OA-37B was also not very fast or maneuverable and could not evade or escape from enemy fighters or missiles. The OA-37B was incompatible or interoperable with other U.S. aircraft, such as the F-16 Fighting Falcon or the A-10 Thunderbolt II, which had more advanced avionics and weapon systems. The OA-37B was also becoming obsolete, requiring more maintenance and spares. The OA-37B was eventually phased out and replaced by the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a much more formidable and effective aircraft for the forward air control role. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was a dedicated close air support and forward air control aircraft with a powerful 30mm GAU-8A Avenger rotary cannon, titanium armor, and high survivability and durability. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was also faster, more maneuverable, and more stealthy than the OA-37B, and it could carry more weapons and fuel. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was the ultimate forward air control aircraft, and it replaced the OA-37B in the U.S. service by the late 1980s and early 1990s. The A-37B was exported and used by various Latin American countries, mostly during the 1970s. It was well suited for their needs because it was simple, low cost, and effective for counter-insurgency and counter-narcotics operations. Some countries that received and operated the A-37B were Chile, Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Peru. These countries used the A-37B in different conflicts and situations and achieved different results and records. Chile received 44 A-37Bs from the US and used them for air defense and border patrol. Chile also modified some of their T-37s into an armed configuration similar to the A-37. Chile used the A-37 in the Beagle conflict, a territorial dispute with Argentina over some islands in the southern tip of South America. The A-37 was used to patrol and protect the Chilean airspace and territory, deterring any potential Argentine attack. The A-37 also participated in joint exercises and operations with countries like Brazil and the US. Chile retired the A-37 by the end of 2009, and some of them were preserved in museums or sold to private owners. Colombia received 26 A-37Bs from the US and used them for counter-insurgency and counter-narcotics operations. Colombia used the A-37 to fight against the guerrillas and drug traffickers and to support the government and security forces. The A-37 was used to bomb and strafe the enemy bases, camps, and convoys and to provide close air support and reconnaissance. The A-37 also carried advanced weapons, such as the GBU-12 Paveway 2 laser-guided bombs, which increased its accuracy and effectiveness. Colombia still operates the A-37, with 14 in service as of December 2022. El Salvador received 30 A-37Bs from the US and used them for counter-insurgency and counter-narcotics operations. El Salvador used the A-37 extensively in the Salvadoran Civil War, a brutal conflict between the government and the leftist rebels. The A-37 was used to bomb and strafe the rebel bases, columns, towns, and positions and to provide close air support and interdiction. The A-37 also escorted and protected the helicopters, which were vital for the mobility and supply of the government forces. The A-37 was a decisive and effective weapon in the war, and it inflicted heavy losses and damage on the enemy. El Salvador lost 2 A-37s in the war, one shot down by a sniper rifle and another by a surface-to-air missile. El Salvador still operates the A-37, with 13 in service as of December 2022. Guatemala received 12 A-37Bs from the US, and they used them for counter-insurgency and counter-narcotics operations. Guatemala used the A-37 to fight against the guerrillas and drug traffickers and to support the government and security forces. The A-37 was used to bomb and strafe the enemy targets and areas and to provide close air support and reconnaissance. The A-37 also participated in joint exercises and operations with countries like the US and Honduras. Guatemala lost 1 A-37 in action in 1985, and it still operates the A-37, with 3 remaining in service as of December 2022. Peru received 36 A-37Bs from the US and used them for air defense and border patrol. Peru also acquired 8 A-37Bs donated by South Korea in 2010. Peru used the A-37 in the Cenepa War, a border conflict with Ecuador over a disputed area in the Amazon rainforest. The A-37 was used to patrol and protect the Peruvian airspace and territory and to engage and intercept the Ecuadorian aircraft. The A-37 also bombed and strafed the Ecuadorian positions and troops and provided close air support and reconnaissance. The A-37 was involved in some air-to-air and air-to-ground combat, and it shot down 1 Ecuadorian IAI Kafir fighter jet, and destroyed 1 Ecuadorian Cessna A-185E floatplane. Peru lost 1 A-37 in the war, shot down by a surface-to-air missile. Peru still operates the A-37, with 20 in service as of December 2022. The A-37B was a valuable and useful aircraft for these Latin American countries, and it served them well in different conflicts and situations. However, the A-37B was also becoming obsolete and faced some challenges and difficulties. Some of the issues were similar to those faced by the A-37B, such as the lack of stealth, agility, and compatibility. Some issues were specific to these countries, such as the lack of spares, maintenance, and training. Some countries decided to retire and preserve the A-37B, and some donated or sold them to museums or private owners. Some countries decided to keep and operate the A-37B, and some upgraded or modified them to extend their service life and capabilities. The A-37 Dragonfly was a successful example of the light attack concept, which uses small, cheap, and versatile aircraft to perform counter-insurgency and counter-narcotics operations. The A-37 proved that a trainer aircraft could be transformed into a deadly weapon and that a Cessna could fly with the best of them. The A-37 also proved that a light attack aircraft could be reliable, accurate, and survivable in combat and could support and protect the ground forces and the helicopters. The A-37 also proved that a light attack aircraft could be easy to fly, maintain, and operate from unprepared runways and remote bases. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like, share, and subscribe. The sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. Thanks for watching, see you next time.